Well. Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and I got a special episode today that I'm super excited about. And sorry, my computer is going crazy, guys. Sorry about this. All right, there we go. Thank you. Welcome to the Comic Binge. I'm your host, Paul Herman. I got a special episode today. I managed to beg, and he finally gave in. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna get right to it. But welcome to Comic Binge. If you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, all that jazz, whatever. I'm just ready to get into this. So, because I've already wasted a lot of his time already. I feel bad. So, without further ado, I'm so pleased to have Anshuman from For the Love of Comics. Hello, sir.
Hello. So glad to be on.
Oh, this is exciting. I discovered your channel a couple years ago. I think during the pandemic or before, something around there, and I fell in love with it. I love it. I love all your videos. I meant to say this before we got on the show, but I'll just tell you now. I wish you streamed more. I told you that, but you should live stream more. You're so great. Your live streams are great. They're so interactive. So, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you.
Yeah. So we have a special episode because one of the things I loved about your channel is that it's so not, and this is not a detriment or an insult by any means, is that it's not focused on superhero stuff. Right, like you are all over the place, which is great. I love that. Because obviously the Comic Binge, I'm trying to branch out as much as I can for different kinds of comics. But I love superhero comics. Admittedly, if you're from his channel, from Love of Comics, yes, I love superhero comics, but I do love comics in general. But I love you've introduced me to so many different things, and we definitely have tastes out of line, and there's some tastes that don't. That's fine. But I love that you love the medium. You've taught me so much in your videos, and I love it. But we do have a common denominator. We do have one major common denominator, and we're going to talk about him today, which is the writer, which I think, and I'm curious if you would agree. I'm assuming you would agree. I think is probably the most maybe underrated writer in comics is Kurt Busiek. I mean,
right. I mean, I know that's what the way you feel, and I'm going to obviously defer to you. Yeah, because I defer to you because I don't have enough expertise in superhero comics to determine who's underrated or who's overrated. That would mean knowing about stuff. So I have a much more skimming sort of approach to superhero comics, and I think the ongoing superhero comics. I like standalone stories. I like I love the genre. I love Marvel and DC stories of certain writers and creators. So definitely I hear a lot of people talking about a number of other writers, but I don't hear people talking about Kurt Busiek as much in the context of superhero comics. So yes, I mean, from my little experience, I will agree with you that he just doesn't seem to get the kind of press or the reputation that others do.
Yeah, I first discovered Kurt Busiek, probably I'm trying to think what was my first time I ever read his comics. Well, I do have one comic but that's also an honor of For the Love of Comics. I want to there's your traditions that I love in your top 5 videos that I'm going to honor here. So I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a second. But no, Kurt Busiek in the 90s, I remember just loving so much of his books, and we'll get into some of those books. But yeah, I just love his stuff, and like because the one thing I love about him as a writer, and I admire about a lot of artists out there that are able to both be fun and also be, forgive the term, artsy, or be that serious kind of focus, because there's a Muppet Babies episode, a cartoon that I always will identify with because I think it's Gonzo or two of the Muppets are basically arguing about dance, and they're saying, is it beautiful or is it fun? And it's like, and they're like, it could be, they're fighting over which one it is, and it can be both, right? And that's the thing about comics and art in general, with the capital A. I love the fact that I think, in my opinion, Kurt Busiek, he dangles that line so well that it's so hard to you go one way or the other. And if he goes one way or the other, which again, most writers I would say do, it's always really good. It's always super fun. And he respects the material enough to, and he loves the lore. I just love everything. I pretty much read anything he does. I always enjoy it. So that's for me why I love Kurt Busiek. I'm curious what you kind of grab. Is there anything is there anything in particular you gravitate towards his writing?
Well, I mean, I think good writing is good writing, irrespective of genre and
Right.
length, etc. There's a certain craft to it. But I have to agree with you. I think, well, it depends on what we're looking for from comic books. But what I've enjoyed about superhero comics, and I'm sure that we'll get into this in detail as we talk
Yes.
about our top fives,
Yes.
is what I've enjoyed about superhero comics. Busiek's, the ones of his, the ones of his works that have really, really appealed to me have done so because they feel to me like this is what superhero storytelling is supposed to bring out in you. And there's a certain nostalgia attached to how superhero comics made us feel when we were kids. And I think sometimes what happens is if I reread something that I really enjoyed as a younger person, I don't enjoy it that much as an adult. But I remember the magic it had. It just doesn't have that magic, or it seems a little more transparent, or now, it doesn't seem as cool as it did. But Busiek is able to make that grow up with me in some ways, where it reminds me of how I felt even as an adult when I read a superhero. It's not like I'm reading that same comic. If it's like a proper translation of the way a superhero comic made me feel as a kid. It's a proper translation to me as an adult. I'm having a very similar experience in spite of my adult sophistication.
Man, that is see, this is why I love you on the show already. Like you break it down. I'm like, dang, I could never say it as good as you. Like, that's beautiful.
No. I mean, but I mean, again, that's my opinion because it's based on, as we'll talk about, very limited reading. I tried to go on Wikipedia and research what he's done, and then I was like, oh, I didn't either. I haven't read more than half of what he's written.
Well, I did the same thing because as I'm thinking, I'm like, as we get, I think we're close in this age, and I was thinking, as I get older, I'm like, my memory is just, I'll forget things he's done even, and I went through, I'm like, he's done Conan. I'm like, oh my god, I forget, and I didn't realize how much he wrote. It's like how much he's done. It's crazy. It's super crazy good. So, I had to research a little bit because I'm like, I don't know about you, but I had to really think about, am I forgetting anything in particular that I'm gonna be like, why did I not say that? Do you think? Do you ever get that? For me, anyway, that's what I had to do.
Well, I mean, I think with any top 10 or top 5 or top 20, depending on the thing, you're going to have some things that you're leaving out that you feel really bad about leaving out. I think with Busiek, I had a very clear idea of what my top 5 was going to be. And then I knew like the 4 or 5, hey, Sleepy Reader, good to see you.
Yeah, hi, Sleepy Reader. Thanks for joining us.
And so I was wondering, like, have I read enough to make? So that's why I told you that I don't think it would be fair to do a top 10, because I think if you were going to make a top 10, you should have at least 50. You 10 out of 50, that's a selection. If you're picking 10 out of 15, that's not really, you should do a top 3 or a top 5.
Right.
It's going to be proportionate to what you've read. So I wouldn't do a top 10 of something that I've only read 11 of. That doesn't make any sense. So I was thinking that I haven't read enough Kurt Busiek to do justice to a top 10 as far as the selection process is concerned. I'd pretty much be putting in the stuff that I've read. So in a top 5, it's a little harder. But then, even though he's one of my favorite writers in superhero comics, and I've the works of his that I love, there are a couple that I've read that didn't do for me what they have done for others, for example. So I'm also curious if we're going to have those kind of things on our list where well, I'm not going to spoil anything because I know things are already flying around. Yeah,
I know. Yeah. So here's the thing. So people who don't know, me and Anshuman, we have not told each other our top 5. Right. So we have not. I have no idea. I'll admit, we both know some of. There's going to be some overlap. Because there is one connection. And before I give it to you, I want to honor also you. And one of your classic staples, my friend, is your honorable mentions. As you all know, right? As you whenever you do a top 5 or top 10, you always here's my honorable mentions, and I love that about you because I'm the same way. I'm like, I gotta bring it all in, So here's my one of my honorable mentions.
Sure.
Which is
let's get started.
What if the all new different X-Men had never lived? And this is authentically a comic I bought I think at Fred Meyer in Washington State. It is still beat to hell. and Kurt Busiek wrote it, and it is, I think, just a fun. I mean, oh my god, I love this comic. I did it for fun more than anything. I do love this comic a lot, and if Kurt is watching, which I'm sure he's not, I love this comic a lot. Yeah, hi Kurt. Yeah, exactly. I tweeted at him. He did retweet it, so it was very nice of him. So
wow, that's nice.
Yeah, so that was one honorable mention. I have another one, but I'm gonna save that possibly for later. But which could be controversial. I don't know. Do you have any honorable mentions? Because I know you love honorable mentions.
No, I'm not going to be doing honorable mentions. And it was, but again, it's one of those capacity things. Is honorable mentions is like when I have 100 and I'm making a top 20 and I've got 10 or 15 that I must mention, or how can you talk about this? But I was very disciplined for this one, and I didn't give myself any and we discussed the parameters. So maybe you want to tell the viewers the parameters or the loose boundaries that we set for ourselves, as well as the game that you want to play.
Yeah. So I have, if you guys notice the comments, I have put what I think Anshuman is going to have for his top 5, and I'm just going off of just throwing it out there. What I think, knowing from watching your videos, your taste, I'm like, I think he's gonna be into this. I already know one of them, but the parameters are, we've said, it can't be obviously if you're doing volume 1, can't count for volume 2 and 3 of the said same thing. Those who might figure that out pretty easily what that is. But well. Right. But anyway, so volume 1 would be 1, and then volume 2 would be one separate, and then volume 3 would be one
so
separate.
We agreed that different volumes or trade paperbacks or collected editions can classify as different picks. So you can pick multiple volumes from the same run or from the same series.
Exactly. Right. So well, see, you're better spoken. I can say it better than that. I can't explain anything. You can just take over, please. I suck at this. Oh, we switched over. We're on opposite sides again. What happened here?
That's after we came back from the thing. Right. Also, the other thing is that so you are writing your guesses for what my list will be in the comments. So I am not allowed to look at the comments. So I'm just saying to any viewers, because I saw you put Sleepy Reader's comment up there. So in case there are any people in the comments, hello. I'm not going to. Should we start with commenting on the comments? I mean, should we just get started? I think we're we're
really quick. Fred Meyer is a department store in Washington State. Sleepy Reader. So I'll throw it to you. Guess first. We're on the proper logos now.
Oh, really?
So I put us on the proper logos. So you start off first. You can go 1, 5. I don't care. I don't have them ranked really. I'm just gonna go.
Okay.
So
I was gonna say the same thing. I don't rank comics. I can't rank comics. Although I would say, if I was going to rank comics, I would probably rank comics by the same creator. I particularly wouldn't be able to rank comics against each other. So when I make a top 10 fantasy or something like that, they're not ranked. So, but for a creator, maybe it's interesting to think of ranking. But again, if we're talking about writers and they collaborate with different artists, I think that becomes a little unfair. So if it was a writer, artist who draws and writes themselves, then I'd be more likely to rank them, or someone. I don't know if that's not true, because I kind of think I would love to rank like Alan Moore comics. I would love to rank those because that I think would be a real, it's
Frank Miller.
Easy to list. Yeah, it's easy to list them, but it's, whether it's going to be number 4 or number 6, I think that kind of ranking thing would be interesting. I don't have any ranking either. Let me ask you, should we start with the obvious ones, or should we go to the less obvious ones?
Well, what do you? I'll defer to you, because I don't know. You're better at this than me. Yeah, it's tough.
Know. I mean, how does it work for like YouTube marketing? Should we save, because the obvious ones are going to be the big names. So do you want to start with the big names and blow your load early, or do you want to wait? Do you want to come right at? So I don't know, how do you want to do it? Do you want to go with the easy guesses first and foremost? And the other question I had was, what do we do? So if you pick something that is also on my list, do we just talk? Do we just talk about it together if we have an intersection?
Yeah, we're gonna have intersections. I'm pretty sure. So I say we just go. Let's go with the obvious choices, but for you and me, we'll start there, and then that way people. Well, let's go from there. I mean, people cannot watch the video. It's fine. I don't marketing. I don't care about marketing. So
all right,
obviously. So let's go.
All right, so let's get the big ones out of the way, because obviously my first book then will be Marvels.
Whoa! Wow, I was not anticipating that. Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm just going with the biggest or the most famous books, so I guess that's the way I can look at it.
There you go.
I'm
There you
not
go.
even sure, how that goes. But
I
yeah, there
guessed
you
it
go.
though.
Oh, so you had Marvels as a
I
guess.
had
All
Marvel.
right.
I thought you were going with Astro City first, but we'll wait. We'll wait for that.
It's one or the other, I think. So
Fair,
I'm going to
fair.
put those two as guesses for your list as well. I'm going to guess that you have Astro City and Marvels on there, but I could be wrong about it. So
Yeah. Well, continue. Yeah. Go ahead. We
all
talk.
right. So
Let's break it down. Yeah.
yeah, so Marvels. I mean, this was I believe this was the first Kurt Busiek I ever read.
Oh, really?
So I
Okay.
think yeah, because I don't think he's done much big stuff before Marvels, but I came into it a couple of years after its reputation had been established, and this was along the times when I was coming back into reading comics. So I read comics as a kid, and I read them, for a long time, and then I got to a point where I was very serious, and I'm only going to read literature and prose and all that kind of stuff. And I moved away from comics, and then somewhere around the age of 20 or so, in college, I kind of came back to it. So from
Same.
maybe
Yeah.
14 to 20, I didn't read comics, although there were always a couple. But because this was one of those first ones, I was like, "Ooh, comics have grown up a little since I last read them." And even when I was reading them before, I was probably reading older comics, not contemporary ones. So I was reading stuff in India in the 1980s that was probably published in the 70s in the US,
Oh,
or
okay.
a
Yeah.
couple of contemporaneous things, or some years older. So the distinct, nature of Marvels, and then I read some others, obviously. So Kingdom Come was one of them, Watchmen and Dark Knight, all of those like grown
Yeah.
up
A
superhero
staple.
comics.
Yeah.
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 And
They're
and the
good. They're
ones,
great. Yeah.
yeah. And I think what's most important is for me, as someone returning, I had read Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Justice League, those kind of things when I was very young, and I'd read those old comics. So reading these they were self-contained. That's what I think really helped people like me get back into comics, is because it wasn't like jumping into the middle of some long running arc. It was, whether you call it Elseworlds or, in anything, it's just like a self contained story which takes things that that you're familiar with, and then puts them across in such a way. And that's what drew me to Marvels, alongside the fantastic painted art, but the
Oh,
kind of seriousness in its approach, that whole like realistic superhero. I mean, I'll be honest, this probably says more about me than anything else, but the way people talk about The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, in some ways I feel that way about Marvels. Maybe I'm just more of a
no, you're right.
cheeseball, optimistic kind of person. I mean, I was like, look, but when I think about superhero comics for adults, I don't necessarily think about bone crunching violence and nihilism, although I can see why that feels adult. I
Pretty
think,
rad.
but like I get it, and I get that
Yeah.
that hyper violence and that sort of what does it take to put on a costume and fight crime, and what are you actually doing? And it's
Right.
but
Right.
it's a particular type of grittiness, and to
For sure.
me, I think the kind of the rose-colored glasses of things like Kingdom Come and Marvels, which had, in spite of whatever they're dealing with, a kind of optimism about them, a kind of
Absolutely.
positivity about the presentation of superheroes and the role that they have, and the kind of mythic, legendary things they become for people who don't have these superpowers, and at the same time, the focus on the common man, the person without the powers. I thought that was so perfectly balanced and so well done. The man on the street thing that he did over here, and that he would continue to do in some other thing that's going to show up on this list. That was it. I was hooked. So I really do credit Marvels with introducing me to Alex Ross and Kurt Busiek, at a certain point of time. But I also really give it credit, one of the major stepping stones into me getting back into comics and reading more.
Oh, sorry, mute myself. So
Yeah.
I think this is such a. I'm so glad you actually picked this first, because I mentioned earlier, one of my honorable mentions was actually I wanted to wait, and it's because Marvels is actually one of my honorable mentions now. So one of the things that I was very much like, okay, like what do I want to do here with I love Marvels, and it's an honorable mention for a reason. But one of the things that I'm not sure if do you have one of these, like these giant things?
No,
I
I do
can't. Oh,
not.
there you go. So there you go. I have my wife got this for me. This is like the equivalent of the
Right.
absolutes for Marvel than to DC. This is just this is amazing. I mean, like
Yeah.
I honestly, this is like way too big to be quite honest. I'm not going to buy very many of these, but
Right.
Marvels is the reason you buy this, right? It's
Right.
not because it's that format. It's no, it's Marvels. So one day I'm gonna actually, I haven't read it like this yet, so I will read it.
Wow.
Yes, but I just time is it's really busy. But one of the things about Marvels that I love, like you said, it is to me, growing up as a comic book fan, in the '90s was really interesting because you always were told, like, you're a Sandman fan, right? Like Neil Gaiman and Sandman and Alan Moore, Swamp Thing, like everyone talks about in Watchmen, and I was too young to really like at the time to really dive into those comics. And they always felt very like sacred to me, right? Like they always felt like DC had like the we have the the more articulate comic books, which again, those are great comics. I'm not going to sit here and say they're not, but as a kid, you kind of feel weird, right? And like, because I remember going to comic stores and loving Marvel, and people would be like buying their Vertigo books and like their other independent stuff, and be like,
Sure. Yeah.
dumb kid. Like honestly, and that's legit. Like it's just like, I'm like, I like Fantastic Four. I mean, like it's just a very, I knew Marvel didn't have the prestige like written work,
Right.
and they've been working, and trust me, they've been trying. They were, or even from then into now, even whatever. And it's better now than it was, for sure. Whole
Right.
different podcast. But Marvel's is the first, in my opinion, of I think literary like masterpiece, if you will, for Marvel itself, because it's
Interesting.
that's the way I always I compare it to like their first real, unless I'm forgetting something, which if anyone in the comment section is or with us live, let me know if I'm forgetting anything before Marvel's that like should be considered like a work of art masterpiece in the vein of like Sandman, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, Watchmen, etc. But yeah, it felt like to me the most relevant, important piece where like I could give my parents and be like, hey, read this. And they'd be like, oh yeah, okay, this is all right. Like, not like, I'm not going to give them like, Avengers 266 and be like, read this. This really, you're going to get a lot out of this. I mean, they're but
Right.
yeah, but no, I love Marvels. And I think it's definitely one of those things where Alex, like you said, it introduced me to Alex Ross. And I'm curious, are you a big Alex Ross fan yourself?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I am. I think there's nothing but admiration I have for his work. Although I will say that not all of his comics have fully engaged me. I haven't read the latest Fantastic Four
Yeah,
Full Circle
I
that
have
he
it.
did,
Yeah.
and I've heard people say that it's excellent. So, but
Mhm.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Marvels. I'm a big fan of Kingdom
Same.
Come,
Oh,
and
same.
I've and of course I've seen a lot of his cover work, and I can understand him as a cover artist and as a poster artist, but I want to see the new book because it's not necessarily as photorealistically painted. I mean, it's definitely Alex Ross
Oh yeah,
style,
I
but
know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I also see what some people may criticize about his artwork. I think for me, it's magnificent, but I don't know. Well, I don't think, first of all, he could produce like a long running series and
Oh
things like that.
no.
But sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes I feel that the fantastic painting is getting in the way of comic storytelling every now and then. And I think sometimes that
Mm.
has to do with just what's being written. I mean, I'm not going to call out anything, but there, I read some, I think it was, now I won't remember the name, but I read a couple of comics that had a couple of pages of interior art by Alex Ross, and they didn't impress me outside of the technical, I'm impressed by it. But I think in Marvels and Kingdom Come, I think he's untouchable. I really like those two books, but I think that's again because of the combination of the writing and the art to
Of the
make
writing,
such
yeah,
good
waiting,
storytelling. Yeah,
yeah, and Busiek's great with, and I love how in Marvel specifically, and again, this is why I love Kurt's writing. I think because he shows an admiration for the lore, which I'll be touching on that a lot here.
Right.
But I love the fact that he incorporates so many different aspects of the Marvel universe of that time through and through that whole lens of like someone else. And really, like, one of my favorite parts was actually in this in issue two, I think it's issue 2. My eyes are so bad. In this comic where he meets the X-Men. And you bring up that whole like the rate, like kind of that whole the racism aspect of X-Men, and how, like, you know, everyone's like against mutants. And I thought that was a beautiful written book about like just that whole aspect, or, you know, of that dynamic, and like how, you know, from his perspective, that person's perspective, and how it changes a little bit. I love that. I love to see that, you know, someone kind of go through, and I'm trying to find the page. I had all these things saved. I don't know where I put it. I thought it was had a Cyclops one, but it's a part where Kurt says to Kurt wrote the scene where he meets the X-Men, and Cyclops is like, or someone throws like a rock at Iceman and it hits him in the head, and he's like, oh, and he's like, who did that? And then Cyclops grabs him and says, they're not worth it. Like, and then like a guy, I was thinking, like, because they're all telling them they're worthless, and then like it's like it stuck with them. He kept saying they're not worth it. They're not worth it. Right. It's like he was fixated on that. I love the flashbacks of going back to it. It was both cinematic without being like a film, you know. It wasn't trying to be a film. It was still the comic book medium, using that same panel over and over again, and the caption. It just works so beautifully. I love how he intertwined all that into this issue particularly. I love this comic so much.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, because I think that's what the thing is, that it's taking itself seriously enough within these larger things, without, you know, where it's taking itself seriously means taking the storytelling and the character work seriously, and, you know, putting that level of attention to creating that psyche rather than, you know, the external thing. Absolutely. I think if, you know, if it hadn't been for Marvels, I might, well, I mean, because of all those books, I put them all together. But I think, you know, once again, is that because Marvels wasn't dark and gritty. I think that has a lot to do with my love of it, is that it felt serious without being cruel. And that's what I think superhero comics are supposed to be. You know, they're supposed to be optimistic, or maybe not always, because, you know, the whole point is to put the twist on it. But when you're talking about these characters, and, you know, you mentioned this point about the Silver Age and the dawning of the Silver Age. When I read Marvels, I had no idea about, I mean, I still don't really, but I really didn't have any idea about that part of it, of that chronology of them coming in this way. And many years later, when I read Darwin Cook's New Frontier, it was the same way. You know, I didn't necessarily get the references to that publication history, but it was still so well done in the storytelling from that point of view of the man on the street, and, you know, how new wonders are coming every day, and every day you have news of some new superhero. I thought that was just such a marvelous way of adapting the number of comic book issues and the number of titles that exploded everywhere overnight almost.
Yeah, exactly. And I found it. It was right here. This is beautiful. Like, this to me, like, I love this. This is why I love comics, right? Like, I just love this. You see it right here, and like, what do you mean by? I love this. This stuck with me as a kid. I just love this so much. You know, and the one last thing I was going to say about Marvels, and now it's escaping me. So, this is what I was going to say. Not Marvels. I'm embarrassed to say this. I have it. I own it. I've never read New Frontier. I know. I like Darwin Cook. I know who he is. Obviously, Ego is a great Batman story, and other stuff he's done, obviously, as well. But no, I'm ashamed to say I've not read that yet. So
no, I mean, you know, there's no one who's read everything, and I mean, the number of titles there are to read. But I think you like it. I mean, that's all I'm always worried about overhyping things, of course. But, we all like to talk about the things that we think are really cool. But I really think that's one of the most appealing comics that I've seen that has a chance of appealing to so many people, because it's just got so much in it. But anyway, that's enough of my number 5. Which one is yours?
I'll start with mine. Is I'll kind of go a little less obvious. I guess we'll save the big stuff for later. I guess we're going to.
Now you tell me. So
no. No. I would say the most obvious for us. We already know what we're going to talk about. Probably we'll save that to the end. Okay, if you know what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm curious if I don't think that you've read this, but maybe you have. But
probably
my
not.
number 5 would be. You never know. Secret Identity by obviously Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immelman. Again, I can't pronounce anything, people. So if you're our first time viewing me, I can't pronounce anything. I apologize. But Superman's Secret Identity, we talked about before. I forgot if it was before the show or after the show, or before, or we're recording early on. We talked about how when you read things as a kid and how like as you get older, sometimes like it doesn't age as well, and you get, you know, it just kind of, it's really different and whatever. But also how like when you read something for the first time, it may not ruminate with you right away, and you read it again, you're like, oh, I get it now. I had basically both those happen with this book. So Secret Identity, I'm not sure, are you familiar with this book at all? Oh, okay, all right, well, I got one wrong. Wow. Yes.
But it's a good way to be wrong, huh?
Yeah. Hey, I'll be wrong. Which, by the way, this thing's out of print. How is this out of print? Yes.
No, it has a deluxe hardcover now.
It's out of print. I'm promising.
Oh, the deluxe hardcover's out of print as well?
Yeah.
Wow.
At least,
all right.
I look online. I looked online because the binge, we did an episode, which if you guys are, if you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, all that jazz. You know, obviously, for love of comics, you're already probably following him. He's awesome. So, but we did a video on I love sub series, and so I have a video called Why We Love Superman. It's a playlist, and the first one we did officially was for Secret Identity, and when I read this comic, I was just becoming into my own as an adult, becoming like buying stuff and whatever. And I remember I got really into Smallville. I got really into Superman, and I started buying. I bought Birthright. I bought all kinds of Superman books, and I bought this because I'm like, oh, Kurt Busiek. I love Kurt Busiek. This is like match made in heaven. And I read it. I'm like, I don't know about this. I don't know. And I wasn't really like connecting with it. I didn't really like it. So years passed. Yeah, years passed. And, I was like 24, I think, when I read it. And, I read it for the first time again, I think this last year. I just like, let's go check it. Let's read this book. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. And maybe being a father now and maybe being older and wiser, because I knew people liked it a lot. And I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't connect to it. Man, I love this thing now. I connected to it immediately. I was like, oh my God, I love this thing. This is beautiful. So I'll talk a little bit. So obviously you picked it too, which I'm like stoked about.
Yep. I knew this was going to make the list. I mean, like, this is one of my favorite Superman stories, and I actually love Superman stories. I think Superman has many, many good stories. Again, the way I look at them, the standalone 1-volume reads, maybe 2 volumes at maximum. I think Superman has so many good stories that have been written that sometimes I don't understand the reputation that he, in pop culturally has. I think there've been a lot of interesting things done, but especially with the mythos. And I think, Secret Identity is one of those where I was just like, man, this shouldn't work. This has no reason to work, and it's working, and it's working really well. So
this is the most amazing comment I think I've ever heard.
Look, I think he's got a point there.
He's got a point. See you guys later. I'm just gonna take over.
Yeah, you let off my shelves know once you're read it, and then he'll be back to check out the rest of your videos.
off the shelves, you're invited. When I do it, I'll invite you on the show. And no BS, I'll do it. So when I do it, we'll have you on. Just hit me up. It is, by the way, it is available digitally. It's on, I'm sure it's on Comixology, but it's for sure on DC Universe, the streaming, the Netflix app, if you will. That's where I got this cover from. So, but it is available digitally, I'm positive, just not available during the beautiful print. So yeah, so I'm actually stoked because the fact you love Superman, it kind of surprises me because there's that because really there's always that negative stigmatism, right? Of like, Superman is a boring character. And it takes that to the next level it takes Superman to the next level of how I love the idea of Superman being real. And this is what would happen. Right. And I think Kurt nails it. Like, you go through the steps of like, oh, I got to protect myself. And, all those things of like, connecting with aging over time and working with the government. There's no super villains necessarily. It just the whole mindset of how a superhero would or Superman, I should say, would treat themselves if he was somewhat in line with his comic book version with the real world. It's beautifully written, man. And as an adult, I just connect to it like crazy now. So which I wasn't anticipating rereading it again. But yeah, like there's so much great stuff here. I think about, because with Superman, I think what's so crazy about him is that he's obviously he's like the best of us, right? Like that's what he is. Like he's like Captain America. He's very much like the best of us as human race. He's but he's not human. That's the whole point. And I love the fact that Kurt keeps that up here of like, it's like almost you're going through major life themes and aspects that I went through as an adult through 20 years or just under 20 years of between reading this basically, and how I related to it. I'm like, man, like Kurt took that whole idea of trials of like adulthood, fatherhood, and change, and embody that into a Superman that's in real lilife. And it's just so, I just love that. I love the themes that it brings up in it of getting older, acceptance. I love all those things he incorporated. And obviously Stewart's art is just chef's kiss. So
yeah, actually, because when I read Secret Identity, I think it was out of print, even when I was, so I didn't know it existed because it wasn't easily findable. And when I found out about it, I was shocked by the fact that not only was it Kurt Busiek, and it's a Kurt Busiek comic that I haven't read, but that it's Stuart Immonen, because I'd become a big fan of Stuart Immonen, but I didn't know he did superhero comics at all. And it's funny. I mean, that's not true. I knew, because I became a big fan of Stuart Immonen because of his comics with his wife. So Stuart and Catherine Immonen have worked on a number of comics together, and I've really enjoyed them. But they also worked together on Patsy Walker Hellcat, which is a superhero comic. So I'd read Patsy Walker Hellcat, and I'd read everything I could find by Stuart Immonen because I loved his stuff so much, but I didn't even know this existed. So I was kind of already geared for it, but I guess I could have been geared for disappointment as well, when it's it's two people and they're collaborating and you didn't know they'd collaborate. It could really not be as good as you were.
It happens.
But I'll refer one thing is that because I don't think about Superman or Batman or Spider-Man or anyone, as being a thing at all. I only think about stories that were written by them, about them. So depending on the writer, depending on the artist, depending on the story, they can be in it. So like Superman being boring because, or Batman being boring because, I understand the point, but I always think it depends on which story you're talking about, which is also why, when people get mad about things like that's not that person, I think somewhere it means that the person who was trying to do something different couldn't pull it off, because if you pulled it off, it would now become a new part of that person. I mean, it would become a new angle to them.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
And when I read Secret Identity, I was just like, so for those, I don't know, whether everyone knows the conceit of Secret Identity, but it's about a boy named Clark Kent, and he's really pissed off with his parents for giving him the name Clark, because they were Kent and they lived in Kansas, so they thought it'd be funny if they called their son Clark. And he goes through life, he goes through school being made fun of and jokes and being bullied and things like that. And then one day he just has the powers of Superman. He just finds out that he's got the powers of Superman. So it's set in a world in which Superman is a comic book character and there are no superheroes in the world. So but they don't give any explanation, right at the beginning of like why or something. But that was such a stupid sounding idea, and it was executed so well. I was floored. I was like, what are you talking about? This sounds like this sounds ridiculous, but it did such a good job of what you're saying, of what Superman means and what storytelling of superheroes, what are they supposed to represent. I thought it was as an honest, like a optimistic piece of writing, but also very postmodern and meta. I thought it was just such a good mix of, and you got a lot of action, you got a lot of action sequences and big epic spectacle and things like that. So it wasn't like some sort of a conversation upon conversation sort of comic. I mean, the fact that it had everything that you could have, thought of. I mean, maybe not super space stuff, but
Sure.
more or less, everything. And then, of course, there's the thing you mentioned, the passage of time and the role of family and children and marriage and Lois and all of that stuff, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know, in 4 issues, it's a 4-issue book. So I think that's really well done. And it's sort of a high wire act that they pull off, I think, brilliantly.
Yeah, I just love the fact they took Superman's concept and made it relatable and it again shows you that you can write a very postmodern but also a very relatable character without being like changing your costume, getting spikes and shoulder pads, and and saying like, I'm Superman with a hyphen.
It's funny you should say that, because he does eventually have a costume change with shoulder pads, but that's because he's older and it's cold up there, and he needs more insulation to keep himself warm.
Right.
So even that costume change thing is done so well.
I forgot. Yeah, see, it's been, I haven't read it since we reviewed it last time, but no, I fell in love with this thing immediately, and it became one of my favorite Superman stories, which I wasn't expecting. I knew I needed to give it another shot because I love Kurt Busiek. Obviously, it's what we're talking about him. But when I reread it, I connected to this thing immediately, and we just raved about it. So go check it out on our playlist for Why We Love Superman. And it's super great. I love it. So I think it's your turn now. What is you? So I love
my next book is Secret Identity. There you go.
There you go. All right. So let's see here. I missed one. So I'll show you what I missed on in a second. So you can pick the next one.
Well, you don't know. I might have it somewhere else. So you
all right.
We'll wait till the end of it. Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, all right. So for me, which I know you're not going to have this, I'm assuming, is Avengers Forever. Now I know. Listen, I know I'm a superhero guy. I'm sorry, y'all. If you're watching, I feel bad because here's the thing.
I feel bad that you feel like you need to apologize.
No,
Avengers, get that away from.
I can't believe it.
I've never read it, but I assumed, because when I was looking up, I saw that he had done Avengers. He'd done, I think, Justice League as well, or maybe I'm mixing that up. Right. So these are things. These are definitely things that I've never read. So.
Well, and that's the thing about comics, right? And this is one thing that I love about your channel is that you show me a side of comics that I don't know, and I love learning, and like vice versa, right? And listen, I'll be honest, I'm not sure you'd love this necessarily, but I sure freaking love it. And the reason why is I'll show you some art, and I think you could definitely appreciate the art. Oh my God, see this on bad, Pacheco. Okay. And to be fair, it was co-written by Roger Stern. So I don't want to diminish that, but Kurt is a big, to me, which obviously Kurt and Carlos Pacheco, excuse me. They eventually worked together later on, but this is a great story. And I did a review of this a couple of years ago after, for MCU required reading, playlist. And this book is like, very relevant because if you love Kang, Kang's a big, thing in the MCU right now. This is like the guidebook of Kang, in my opinion. Like this is, right. If you want to get into Kang, read this. Avengers Forever is where it's at. Now, again, this is not gonna be for everybody, but if you love like just fun craziness, this is it. And they put in so much continuity, and the artwork and the layouts are so good. They're so good. I love this book, man. I think this book is so good. It's dense. I ain't gonna lie. It's dense, but it's really fun. Good.
Do you think it'll be appealing to someone who doesn't read the Avengers but might have just like watched the movies or something like that? Or do you think there's too much distance between the MCU
That's
and
a good question. If you like the MCU, I think this is 1000%. You have to read this. And that's why I have like a required reading playlist of videos I have. All my videos are streams, so that's why I make sure I put them in playlists because the videos don't show up there. So if you want to watch any of my videos, go on there and watch those. But the MCU required reading, I always pick books that I think like you said, if you like the MCU, go read this. Like if you're like getting pumped up, go read this basically.
Right.
And Avengers Forever is 1000% a book. I think if you're in the MCU, go read this. This is so much fun. It's got Loki stuff from that series. It's got the Ant-Man stuff. It's got the future movie stuff. It's got everything Kang related. I mean, it's just fun. And talk about knowledge. It interweaves so much continuity. And like I said, the layouts are just so fantastic. I just love them. I mean, like this stuff is just like, I just love this, and it's so kinetic. Every panel is not wasted, and there's just so much going on. And I love that. I love that about the book itself. So yeah, definitely. This book is definitely, I think, worth checking out if you love the MCU. And if you're kind of casually into Marvel or any kind of superhero comics, 1000% go check it out. It's super great. I'm not sure if you would love this necessarily, but again, I don't know. I'm not sure if you're an MCU guy. Are you an MCU guy? I don't know.
MCU. I mean,
it's fine. You just say your piece. You're good. You're among friends here. I'm not going to judge you. Trust me.
I think those movies have a lot of charm, but they're engineered to have that charm. But then once that charm fades, they start seeming quite similar. So I've always enjoyed those movies that kind of weren't setting up other movies and weren't all about where you spend a lot of time with the characters. So I really liked the first Iron Man. I thought that was really
movie.
Good.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. And when it came, I was like, this is, once again, I think I'll show myself as being a really cheesy person where I haven't enjoyed any of the DC movies I've seen, unfortunately.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah, but that's again because I don't know, because I'm not thinking about them in comparison to the comics or anything like that. I'm just thinking about them as movies.
The films.
So
films.
Yeah, because if I want to read I'll read comics. In fact, I think that comics do better action sequences than movies do. I kind of blank out in movies, it's like a white noise. And I said this in one of my videos or live streams, I think, is that the animation inside my head, when they've just given me one pose and I'm constructing what happened before and after that, is so perfect that no movie has the physics engine yet to do it correctly, so that's why I like animation, because it's more stylized, when you look at anime, when you look at something that isn't trying to be realistic. So in general, the MCU, the DCU, the superhero movies are, I don't know, my favorite superhero movie is The Incredibles, because I think that's the way.
That's fair.
That's a really good superhero movie.
It is. It is.
So I think about the MCU, the way I think about a lot of in continuity comics is that there's some very good stuff, and then there's some very not good stuff, and then there is just simply bland stuff, which is not bad and it's not great. It's just okay. It's kind of like popcorn, and you enjoy it, and then it's kind of insubstantial, and then you just eat something else afterwards because you're still hungry. So that's kind of the way I look at that.
And listen, and if you're watching this for the first time, I'm telling you right now, I grew up a Marvel zombie, and like that's what I was. I was born and bred on Spider-Man and Secret Wars comics, and I just love them. I'll always love them, and those movies I'll always have an affection for, because I grew up never having those films. So and I never thought I would have them, and now I have them. So I'm always gonna watch them. I always will be biased towards them. I'm critical of them too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I did not enjoy Love and Thunder very much. It was not a great movie. I liked Quantumania though. That was a lot of fun. So I
haven't seen that one yet.
I mean, it's zany. It's and Kang's incredible. I freaking love Kang, but I'm also biased. I love Kang. But yeah, listen, I don't begrudge people who don't love superhero films, because we've gotten a lot of them. So I don't begrudge any of them.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: is that I don't mind. Like, let's say I think The Matrix is a superhero film. It may not be based on a superhero comic, but it's a superhero film. And I think The Matrix, in spite of its flaws, is a superb superhero film in many ways. So I like superhero films that feel like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I don't want to compare them to comics, and I completely understand what you're saying, because somewhere I had also thought that, when I was young, that, I want to see these characters in a movie. But whenever I saw them in a movie, and this is the, who was the guy who was Street Hawk? I don't know. There was a show called Street Hawk, and he was on a motorcycle. But he was in a Hulk movie, you know, the one that Lou Ferrigno was the Hulk, and he was Daredevil. And I was like, this is not kind of doing.
Yeah, Daredevil.
Rex Smith, I think his name was.
Oh, that's
Rex
right.
Smith.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. You know, and so then I watched a lot of cheesy movies, and it just kept going, and I like Blade, you know, which is the movie that made me.
Well, Blade 2 is
like,
incredible too, by the way.
Yeah, but you know, it had its own aesthetic where it was like, I'm going to do these leather trench coats, and I'm going to do this electronic music and shower of blood and strobe lights, and that's what I liked. Is like it was a movie that looked like a movie and it felt like a movie, and it was doing its own thing, and that's why. Like when I read a really good Spider-Man comic, I don't want to watch it in a movie. I just got a superb experience over there. So I'm able to separate those two. I can be a big fan of Spider-Man and not enjoy a Spider-Man movie.
Totally get it. Yeah, I mean, like, because that's the thing is why go see it if you can go read if it's written better, right? That's kind of I totally get it. I totally get it. I think for me is just that I love Spider-Man's my all-time favorite character. And I love him to death. I will support almost anything he does, essentially, for the most part. And I'm just geared that way. I mean, my first memories of anything in life besides my family was Star Wars and Spider-Man. Like, I can remember. My earliest memories was like I'm not sure how old I was. I must have been like 3, maybe, but I don't know. But I remember playing with. Out of a pack, like I remember opening the package up of a Dr. Octopus Secret Wars action figure. Ooh. Like, I mean, I remember like it's been a while since that, so and I just love him. I just love the Spider-Man as character. So anyway, Avengers Forever. If you love superhero comics, go read it. It's great. So what is your next pick?
Okay. So I don't know what you've guessed because I haven't looked at the comments yet, but I think I might. So from what I figure, what we discussed, we're saving the obvious one for last. So I'm not going to go to my second big one. So there was Marvels, and then there's the obvious one that's coming last. So then I've got, and I showed, we already talked about Secret Identity. So that leaves the two I can choose from. All right, I'm going to go with one that's, I think, a more famous thing, and one that will be probably, but I'm guessing that you don't have these on the guesses, and I'm guessing there'll be one reason why, but anyway, because you said Conan.
Oh my gosh! Whoa! Woo! So all right, I'm listening.
Yeah, this is because you mentioned that you didn't know that he had done Conan.
No.
And I'm sort of the other way around, is that I was so intimidated by how much Conan there is to read, and I read like one random volume of Savage Sword, and I read, a P. Craig Russell hardcover, but I'd never really gotten into Conan the way, because there was just so much from so many years. And then someone told me, hey, there's a reboot kind of thing that starts from the start. Right. And I was like, all right, sounds like, but it all, as I said, it all depends on how good is it. Who's writing it? And they said Kurt Busiek, and I'm like, hello, okay, that sounds, let me see it. But I was completely blown away by I don't know if you've seen the pages from this. Gosh. So there's Carrie Nord's. This is Carrie Nord.
Carrie Nord. Oh wow.
Yeah. And it's superb Carrie Nord artwork. But there's also Born to the Battlefield, which is like so you've got this story, and then you've got these flashbacks. So you've also got these backup stories or these flashback stories by Greg Ruth.
Okay.
And Carrie Nord and Greg Ruth both do a superb job of the art, but but I have to say the writing in this was excellent. Again, this is one of the reasons why I love Kurt Busiek, is because he's not trying to be snarky, and he's not trying to be jokey. He's playing it straight, but he's also modernizing it. He's also updating it to our modern sensibilities without being disrespectful to the pulp origins. So whether you think about the way women are treated or shown, etc., it's kind of a it's kind of a dicey line, again, to straddle, to say that, oh, well, I want to write in that fashion and I want to have this kind of stuff. But the storytelling that Kurt Busiek over here never feels like it feels like Conan, and it feels bloody, and it feels savage, and it also feels epic and feels tragic. And you
Wow.
start
Okay.
the idea of being empathetic towards a character like Conan, I thought would always be difficult. And that was
Mhm.
another reason. It's just like, if I have someone who is not savage, but whose morality and whose behavior is very based in, you've got to have other things. You've got to have other things that redeem them, and how can you
Right. Right.
redeem someone who has this kind of these are all the things that I thought about Conan before I read this, and this was so good, and it was so exciting and so much just fun, as you were saying,
That's so cool.
without
Okay.
insulting my intelligence, without
Right.
talking
Right. Right.
down to me, or without patronizing. That I thought that this is sword and sorcery, or
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
sandals and swords kind of stuff in a way that really really appealed to me. So yeah, so one of my books is Conan, and I think he only did the first two volumes, but
Okay.
I continued with this series because I got into it. And I
Sure. Yeah.
think I'm forgetting who followed him. I think it was Truman Trillo. I'm not
Hmm.
sure, but the continuation was pretty good too. And I think Gary Nord continued on the art for a while after Busiek left as well. So it ended up being a series that I really enjoyed. But the start of it, the first two volumes of these
Mhm. By Kurt.
particular omnibuses from Dark Horse are by Busiek, and they're excellent.
That's awesome, dude. Dude, I'm so glad you did that because I saw that and I was intrigued. Like you, Conan's a very intimidating character to get into.
Right.
I've always, but I mean, I'll be honest. I really want to go and read like the stuff that's drawn by Buscema and Barry Windsor Smith. I need to
Hmm.
go and read that stuff, right? So I'll be honest. I've had a hard time with getting into Roy Thomas writing, like from
Hmm.
back in the day. Like it's so, and I love like Silver Age, Golden Age, everything. But like the problem is with Roy specifically, for some reason, I just have a hard time reading those. And I know he wrote that forever. So I'm
Hmm.
like, I don't know about this one. I will see. But yeah, but I want to read those. But now it's cool to have like an entry point for Conan because Jason Aaron, I think when Marvel got the character back and then lost it again, but during that time frame, Jason Aaron got it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, it seems fine. He's a good writer. And I don't know, but the fact that Kurt Busiek wrote it, it's extremely intriguing to me. And the fact that you have it on your list, I'm like, okay, now
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
in. I'm sold. I'm sold.
Yeah,
So
I do not think you're going to be disappointed. This one I'm pretty safe in assuming that when you give it a shot, you will really like it, because there's just nothing in it. I would be surprised to hear people talk about why it's. I mean, some people could just say, I don't want to read Conan
yeah,
stories,
yeah,
and that's a
that's what it comes
completely
down to.
different
Yeah.
thing. But if you're interested, yes, so I'm not a big Robert E. Howard scholar, so I'm
Me
not going
neither.
to be able to get into whatever someone's going to say. Well, they betrayed the spirit of his original. No, I just look at it as an adaptation. I look at it as one
Yeah.
writer's take on an existing character and existing world, and I thought that the ability to draw people in to something new,
Mhm.
when you have this kind of, like us, I'm sure many people are like that, where they just have a reputation, and you've at least got the Roy Thomas writing. I think I tried to read some Roy Thomas. Was it Tarzan? Oh, it might have been Tarzan or
Probably,
something like
man.
that, because and
It's
I
just
and I and
hard.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I mean, I can try to take myself back in time to a certain extent, but after a
Hmm.
while, it doesn't quite work unless
Hmm.
it is about something else. So even with something before the stream started, we were talking about Little Nemo.
Hmm.
I mean, Little Nemo, it's almost like you don't need to read it. You can
Yeah. No, I
just
know. Right. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can just look at it and read it in that way. But I don't think you'll be
Hmm.
disappointed with Busiek's writing in this. It's really good. I mean, the dialogue is very good. The narration is very good. The characters are consistent. There's enough change and things happening, but enough stays the same that you can have that sort of Conan formula of him moving from situation to situation. So that classic with the modern feeling, that's, as we were saying, that's my thing about Busiek, is that this is someone who can write something classic and make it feel modern. He can write
Right.
something that's, evokes my childhood wonder, but is written for a grown up. That's the thing I admire most about his writing. And I think Conan's a very good example of that.
Yeah. And if Sleepyhead here says a good point, or I guess that's really cool. I mean,
That's good to know. Yeah,
yeah,
because
it's good to know.
it felt very engaging.
Authentic. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm gonna. So my next pick. I think we're gonna be in line after this one.
Well, of
But
course, we have only one left.
yeah. Well, I have two left actually. I think.
Oh, right. We've done some weird intersection.
Yeah, it's fine. This has actually been perfect, by the way. So,
Okay.
I love this. I love natural conversation. So, here's something that I don't know if you'd like it, but I think you might. And I'm just gonna, again, it's superhero related. I say this because I can see your taste, and I'm like, you might be into this. If you like Kurt, and especially if you like Conan, I'm like, okay, this gives me hope. My pick is, and I love this thing to death, Untold Tales of Spider-Man. That was written back in the 90s during the Clone Saga era. And if you're familiar with that at all, Spider-Man comics got super complicated, insane, and crazy. I love it because it's like so bad it's good kind of a thing. But during the time, it was very controversial. People were upset. People kept saying like, "Oh, it's Peter Parker." All those, everyone's complaining. Well, Kurt Busiek and Pat, and forgive me, I'm terrible at pronouncing things. Olaf, went and did this, like, I think it's 16, 17. It wasn't, a couple of years at least, almost 2 years worth of Spider-Man stories, and they are just fantastic. They're in this is the omnibus, and it has like some other extra things in there that he wrote. Kurt himself was part of its Amazing Fantasy 16, 17, and 18, which is great. Which is all tied together, but for me it's mainly Untold Tales of Spider-Man, the main series. This is some of my favorite Spider-Man stories ever. And I tweeted at him. I've said, dude, when I got this omnibus, I'm like, or I talk about it, I'm like, this is a Spider-Man to read. People ask me, how do I get into Spider-Man? Or how do I get my kids into Spider-Man? There's obviously Ultimate, like that's the popular one, but this is when I tell people, I'm like, this is, I think, the best because it's fun. It's really easygoing, and it's really like it's modernizing Spider-Man. But the cool thing about this is it's not modernizing it and making it current. It's all in between the original Lee and Ditko issues. So it's like filling in the blanks between all the original run of the character. So he's referencing issues like when he fights the Vulture, and then, and back and forth and setting up other characters, like when Electro shows up in Daredevil in issue like 8, his own comic, Daredevil's comic, right? That's what Kurt did, and it's so good. It's so fun, and it got there's great moments in that you would not even expect. I love this series to death. I mean, it's a brisk read, and another thing too, back in the day, it was only 99 cents. So when comics were about $1.50, almost $1.95, $1.25, $1.50. This was trying to like appeal to that younger audience, or to kind of have a cheaper option, if you will. Again, amongst other things, I'm not sure Kurt would correct me on that, but either way, I love it. I love these comics. This might be some of my favorite Spider-Man ever. Definitely, maybe my favorite Kurt Busiek stories ever. I don't know, but yeah, this stuff is fantastic. There's great moments here, like. And you can argue, like, why does he reference it, this and that, and you can get all that complicated. I'm not worried about that, because there is a really important death in this comic that I think people don't know, and I love it. He also emphasizes, again, I'm not sure if you knew this, but like Jerry Conway wrote, it's called oh my god, what was it called? But in the 80s, before they got married, Spider-Man and Mary Jane, he wrote an issue explaining how Mary Jane knew who Spider-Man was, and kind of telling the tale of, like, because she knew who she eventually reveals that she knew Spider-Man was Peter Parker or whatever, right? And she's known forever. And he kind of talks about it like in this kind of past, in this one-shot issue before, when they got married. And then Kurt goes in and goes even depth, I think, even more of the character. And this is why I think you'd be into it, honestly, is because it really goes into that mindset of like why someone would fall in love with Peter Parker, because she sees him as Spider-Man and Peter, but why she falls in love for Peter Parker, not for Spider-Man. Does that make sense? So there's just great moments and great artwork, and storytelling is so good on all ends. Like, I just love all this stuff. You know, like I just love the work that he goes in. He really goes into like the love lives of all these characters of like Peter, Betty Brant, introduces new characters, and also has fun by creating new villains, new allies, just super great stuff. And I just love the series. Again, if you are just an average Spider-Man fan, but you like Kurt, haven't read this, go out and get this. You will not regret it. It's so much fun. Love it. I'll eventually do a deep dive of this for the binge at one point. But but yeah, this is definitely top tier Spider-Man in my opinion. Have you heard of this at all?
So you think it'll appeal to me because it's about Spider-Man and it's classic but new, and it's optimistic and it's old-fashioned but modernized.
Well, I think it's yes, that, but right. I think also,
and you'd be right, because that's the one that I was saving for the one that I thought that you would not be able to guess that it was on my list as well.
Are you serious? What?
I don't have the omnibus, and that's been really tough because I was like, oh, there are so many other books to buy, etc. Sure. But I did see that the omnibus came out, and I was just like, well, I don't read omnibuses. I find them difficult to read, etc. But the entire Busiek Olive Run collected is, I think Volume 2 is coming out next year, so that'll be all the issues in 2 volumes. I don't know. I think I'm going to capitulate. I'm going to get it because the Marvel Visionaries volumes that I have is only the first 8 issues, and I read the others from a friend of mine who had, I think, an old trade paperback, maybe one of the but or like a collected thing, something. But it's a fantastic series. I agree with you 100% about everything you've said. That. And this is one of those things that I think people don't talk about. It's just like, as you said, it's in those years, and so it's between the chapters, and it's just more of that. It's more of the family drama and everything. But yes, I'm glad to see that I've surprised Sleepy Reader as well. I did think that, especially because you were apologizing so much for mentioning superhero comics. I was just like, what are you talking about? One of my favorite Kurt Busiek stories. One of my I guess since we know what the last book is, Conan is the only one that's not a superhero comic over here, and it's Busiek. Right. But honestly, even with, I've read some more recent Busiek. I've read some more. And I've read him in anthologies, etc. There's a lot of stuff I like. There's some stuff. This really stands up. This stands up to the test of time, as we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. It's something that I can revisit, and it still feels, it still puts a grin on my face, and it still feels like good old Spidey action. And you mentioned Roger Stern before, because when I was young, I read what I now realize was a lot of Roger Stern Spider-Man. So good. And it was very, though those stories were very important in creating who Spider-Man was in my head for much of my life. So, and I know, because I've heard you talk about, Secret Wars and the black costume and things like that. I was very young when I first saw ads for that. And I never read any of the Secret War comics, but I read some comics. And I think I read one Spider-Man comic which ended with him entering that doorway in Central Park or something like that and getting sucked in. So I had that issue, and then he disappeared, and then there we go. and then so this is the thing, and he disappeared, and he says, Spider-Man will return in this issue, but find out where he went in Secret Wars #1. And then I think a couple of years later, I was reading some other single issue, and that also ended with that superhero getting pulled away. And I was like, what is this Secret Wars? So I created this entire mythology in my head of what Secret Wars was, based only on ads and posters. And then many, many years later, when I read Secret Wars, and then I read the Clone Saga and the black costume stuff and the symbiote, etc., I was like that. I was like, man, this is getting really complicated, and it's not as cool as it was in my kid head as an adult when I'm reading it. It's just not that good. It's not that well written. I'm not that excited by it. It just seems made for, I was going through this whole superiority complex, and then I read this, and I was like, see, now that is what I can completely get behind 100%. So I think I reacted very much the way Kurt Busiek and Pat Olive were reacting. Like they were like, let's simplify it, let's take it back to the basics, let's make it something very classic instead of this whole cosmic alien, all these other things. I mean, of course, there's that kind of stuff, but
I love that stuff too.
Yeah, it felt like that classic Roger Stern storytelling too. But
right.
Yeah, it's like Smallville Spider-Man. It was good, great stuff. So yes, I'm very happy to see that on your list as well.
This is a great moment. I love getting even more into Peter's head, which which Stan Lee did. I think he revolutionized, right? I mean, back in the day. I mean, I'll be honest, reading that back in the day is still rough at times. I still love it, but it's like we're just basically repeating the same thing that was happening on the panel in his head. It's like, why are we repeating ourselves here, right? But I mean, Ditko and Lee, I think they both deserve credit. They really got into the idea of a struggling superhero, and I love Kurt going even deeper into that. I love this part where he's like, Peter has a temper, and I've gone on. Again, I always bring up my sub series here. I have a sub series called the Spider-Man Council, and one of the things about when we do on there, we were talking about Peter, in recent comics and whatever, and I always like when writers go back to Peter's temper, because he's got a temper. Like he's not like a Steve Rogers where he's like composed all the time. For me, Peter's flaw is he's not overly emotional, but he can lose his temper, and he'll like, as we see right here, right? Like he'll just out of costume, bam, he'll hit him, and he's like, oh crap, I mean, I love that because he makes mistakes, and like I have a temper myself. I sometimes get a bad temper, so it was really like, it's cool to identify that with Spider-Man, but like just the different things like that too. And
do you have a lot of broken lampposts around your home?
I probably do at some point. I've hit some holes in my wall. I'm not too proud to admit, but my point though is like, it's nice to see someone who you can identify with, is a good person, struggle. And that's the whole point of Spider-Man. And that's the whole, I think that Kurt and Pat did a great job of getting us inside that headspace, but also into like how he struggles and all his supporting cast. Again, one of the arguably the most strongest aspect of the character, and really even flesh him out even more so. Again, it's beautifully written, man. Like obviously because it's your top favorite. So which I'm so happy about. Like, have you read Amazing Fantasy 16, 17, and 18? Have you read those ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are, and again, it's not Alex Ross. Painted stuff is beautiful too. I'll see if I can get this on here or not, but that's too hard. This omnibuses are hard. I'm not an omnibus guy. Are you an omnibus guy?
Not really.
I'm not. Yeah, me neither.
Sometimes they're the only way you can have certain stories, and I go for that. But I think I've in recent years I've moved away from the omnibus or even the absolute format, as tempting as it is for the production aspect of it and the beautiful object aspect of it. The fact that I don't read them makes them not. They shouldn't be the things I buy because I don't read them.
Yeah, for the record, I actually don't. I own more than I think I thought I did actually, but I don't read them. No, because I don't read them either. Because especially the Amazing Spider-Man 1, the volume 1, it has like 100 issues in it. It's way too big. But this one's, I think, respectively, pretty decently sized. It's not too big. This is reasonable. This is a reasonable.
It's okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm trying to see what something this size.
Yeah.
This would be like, this is nice and oversized, and it's slim enough.
It's slim.
I think
you can actually hold it.
This is my ideal deluxe size. I think, of course, I have humongous ones, but again, you have to put them out on the table. And if it's an art book or a gallery edition, it's a different thing. But if it's something you're reading and you're reading every panel, I do think there is such a thing as having things being too big, as sacrilegious as it sounds.
No, you're right.
But particularly with Gert, I think, I've got to be able to open it in my hands and read it like this with one hand behind it. And even that will get tiring after a while. So you've just got to be able to if I can't do at least this, then I think it's a little bit of a missed, it's just going to sit on the shelf most likely.
Yeah. No, that you're on the money on that. Man, I'm so jazzed you picked that up. So I guess are your 5 done?
Well, I have the one last one. I think you have 2 left, right?
I have 2 left. So let's go ahead and hit yours up, because I
No,
think
no, no. You go ahead and get your number 4 out of the way.
Wait. See my math. I'm bad with math, y'all. So help me out.
No, because you had an honorable mention. Marvels wasn't a pick for you.
Oh yeah. So Marvels that was honorable mention. The last honorable mention was Thunderbolts. This is not my pick, but Thunderbolts. I don't think you'd be into this either, to be honest. But if it's number 1, I'll take my shirt off and
I know that would be crazy. No, I'll spare you the suspense right now. I mean,
if you honestly pick this, I would probably die. I would be like, oh my god, I love it.
I mean, the shock would probably be about what's being left out more than what's being included.
That's fair. No, yeah. So that was my honorable mention for that. So my 1 and 2 are connected. So I'll just leave it at that. That's why. Should I go or should?
Go.
Is your
go
one?
For it.
Okay, all right.
You've got because now you've realized that I haven't taken multiple volumes from the same series because I only have 1 volume left.
Okay. All right. So if you guys were probably figuring this out, I'm gonna go with the most. Because they're not in potential order. We'll go with the obvious one, which is obviously, in my opinion, I think a masterpiece. Astro City, Volume 1, Life in the Big City. I think this thing is just amazing. I haven't reread it in a while. I started reading this week, and I forgot how good this is. Yeah, it's so good. Where is that? What is that, a deluxe edition? Where'd you get that? That thing's incredible.
Yeah, this is the first edition, the first hardcover edition.
I need to get that. That thing looks incredible.
Yeah, it's really nice. I mean, I saw the Metro books and the Vertigo, but I was, when I got into Astro City, I found these.
Those are awesome. I love that. I've seen that.
See, they're like signed.
Oh, it's great, man. See, you got I see. This is why I knew we'd be homies, because you were doing like your top image books, which I love that stream. I was just eating it up. Because again, you always show me books that I don't know, which I love. But so when we connect, and I'm like, oh man, when you said I love Astro City, it's my favorite, superhero, I'm like, okay,
yeah,
we'll be cool. We'll be cool. But no, Astro City, Life in the Big City is just maybe some of the best superhero comics ever written.
Yep.
Plain and simple. I will fight and argue and say you are wrong if you don't think this is some of the best. If you can't read this and be like, oh yeah, this is like some of the best ever, in my opinion. I love it. It's great.
I feel like I should stop talking about it because I've hyped it up so much that I feel bad because it's inevitably going to have someone be disappointed if they're listening to me talk about it. So I've started, maintaining a poker face and like, oh, yeah, you should check it out. It's not bad, but it really is. It's superb. It's fantastic. It's
so good.
And it's and I'll agree with you on volume 1. Like I did think, but I think a sleepy reader said right at the beginning of the stream, and that's literally what came to mind, is that if we're allowing a variety of volumes from the same series, the top 5 could just be 5 Astro City volumes.
I mean,
it's
you're not wrong.
That good a series.
Yeah.
So I picked it as a representative, but yeah, Life in the Big City, the first volume, is perhaps the best first volume of anything I've ever read. The first issue is probably one of the best issue number 1s of any superhero comics I've ever read. The number 2 is probably the best number 2 I've ever read. It's like one of those. It's just like everything is a chart buster.
Yeah. Man, I reread this and I forgot, like, again, I like the Silver Agent book story. I like all of them, but I forgot, like, as I'm reading it, I'm like, this is so good. This is so good. Like, I'm just like, dang, like, I love. And I came up with this term the last couple of days, and maybe someone's already said this before and whatever. But like, one of the things about comic book storytelling, especially superhero or any single issue, like, serialized storytelling, you have to be dense and condensed. And that's, to me, that's what comic books is, right? Like, not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them are condensing a lot of information into one, whatever. And that's the one thing I think that maybe Kurt does better than maybe any comic writer I've read, is he's able to condense so much information, but also never feel like you're overflowing the reader and the panels, with the artist, that they can lay out the story still, and you're getting so much information and you're still like comprehending it, because it's not just Brent Anderson, it's not just Pat Olaf, it's everything I've read of Kurt Busiek, I basically get the same thing. He's putting so much information, whether it be themes or or lore. If you're me, if you love the Marvel lore, he puts so much information in his scripts that it's amazing that you're not like, this is too much, this is dumb. Like, because honestly, if you were to any other writer to try to cram as much as, in my opinion, as him, as what he does in these books, especially Astro City, as he's creating the lore as he goes, or not as he goes, but as he reveals it to us. Right. It's impressive that you're never like, what? You just go along with it because it's so natural. That is a hard thing to do, folks. In my opinion, it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that as much as I like lore, I can equally be put to sleep by bad exposition and lore dumps. And, this will happen because I've said it's happened. But at the same time, a lot of what we enjoy, pulp stuff, genre stuff, etc., does have a certain aspect of that, where I need him to be able to do this. But the difficulty is always like, when do I do the character-based storytelling? Because it has to be motivated by character. It has to be because of character choices. For me, good storytelling.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So this idea of where you take these ridiculous superheroes and these powers and these cosmic forces and things like that, and you make it about individual characters and choices, is never been done better in superhero comics than Astro City, in my humble opinion. And Astro City has one-shots, and it has little mini arcs, and it has long-spanning arcs, and it does all of them so well. I mean, I can only think of, one or two storylines that are not fantastic, and that's only comparing it to the rest of Astro City, because everything sets such a high bar. So I'm always amazed by how good it continues to be over the years, in so many volumes. And it does this myth making, and it does this going back to its myth, and it going back to its lore. And even if you don't remember everything, you feel you're in good hands, and so you go along with it. As you were saying, you're like, I know that you're in charge. I know you've done a good job. And it's not just because you've taken detailed notes. It's because you've made the characters so compelling and interesting that I don't care if I remember every detail, I buy it at this moment. And that's what I think is so important, where I've had conversations with people in which I talk about books that I didn't like. And one of the reactions that some people always have is, because you didn't get it, And I mean, I kind of understand what they mean, but at the same time, I do think it's kind of condescending as well, where I'm just like, I'll get what the authors give me, if they've got,
yes,
if
exactly.
I've got to go away and do research, and if I've got to go look at citations and footnotes and all that stuff in order to enjoy it, something hasn't worked. And that's what I think Busiek does better than some other people who get, who write mind-blowing stuff that doesn't appeal to me that much.
Right,
and then he writes stuff that is incredibly appealing to me, because he's not trying to blow my mind. He's really trying to tug at my heartstrings. Yes. And he's using the same things that people use to blow your mind. So that's what makes the ambition of this series, and the execution of it matching that ambition such a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and you touch on something too, like about whole, if you don't like something, you don't get it. But I mean, the thing with people forget, and in my opinion, and maybe this is going to sound condescending, maybe, but forgive me and call me out too if I'm being a jerk here. But the one thing I would say about anything with art, whether it be comics, music, movies, it's all about what you get out of it, right? That's what, to me, whether it's commerce, whether it's pure just your own independently released thing. It's all about what you get out of the art that's given to you, whether it be the way the artists or the directors or the writers or the artists or the inkers or whatever, right? It's all about what they're giving you and what you get out of it. And because even though their message may be what they want to say, let's be real, the art will always be what the people take it out of, like will always make it out to be. So if you have to enjoy, if being told you don't get it, this means that it just wasn't connecting, right? So like, that's the thing. It's all about getting out of what the artist gives you. And that's the thing about comics that I love, because, in film, it's similar because obviously they're cousins, they're related. But with comics, when you get a page like this with the Samaritan, I always want to call him Good Samaritan, obviously, but it's a very conscious choice to have the layout of this. And I love when the storytellers and the writer and the artist, and oftentimes it's writer artist, but with Kurt, he's obviously not drawing. He has a lot of great artists with him, but there's so many implications in the layouts and why it's carefully put in. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but you emphasize that here's a good Samaritan. Here's Samaritan. He's Superman. He's physically putting on his costume. Like, I just love you're telling the audience to connect to this guy. He puts on his pants just like everybody else. And it's just those little things, they just go a long way, and that's what I think Kurt does so much, is he does the little things and people try to skip out, and he knows how to take shortcuts without cutting us out of the story. And that's, to me, why Astro City is so good, because it's all about the characterization, less about the actual story. And like you said, there's many arcs, which we'll get to in a second. There's many arcs that are phenomenal, but to me, like, Astro City works because it's a character study on the human condition, like all superheroes are, but it's firmly placed on how humans and relations and like, at least for me, that's how I take it out of it. Like, I reread these stories, I'm like, oh my God, like, these are phenomenal. And yeah, I just think I love how Kurt puts in a lot of humanistic aspects and relatability, like a secret identity that he puts into here. That's kind of the same kind of feel anyway. So yeah, I think Astro City, Life in the Big City, is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first story with his dreams is a great setup for Samaritan, and it's just like, so it's like this, where my friends and I, when we talk about it, they're like, what's the best Superman story? What's the best Superman story ever written in a single issue? And they're like, Astro City #1. That's the best Superman story written. You're like, what's the best noir superhero story? You're like, well, that's the Confession storyline. It's like everything. And similarly, it's like, what is the best crisis story ever written? And many people will say it's The Nearness of You, one single issue, and the crisis is a double-page spread. But the whole story, as you are saying, is about the human cost of a reality-altering thing in which everything gets reset, everything gets fractured, and it's broken, and then it's put back together. But then you'll have one person who doesn't have what they have, and they never had it, but they can feel that absence. That whole idea of this is how you look at reality-altering crises is, it's taking this sort of infinite worlds idea. Yeah. It's taking this ridiculous concept, which we have seen so many times before, and bringing it to a level of pathos and heartbreak where you were like, actually, you couldn't have written the story if it wasn't for a reality-altering crisis. That's what makes it so great. So, I mean, that's just one of the most easy examples, and these are every time he has a short story, when he has this, when he has the Spider-Man equivalent stuff.
Yeah, right.
But you can't even tell, it's like is Jack in the Box? Is he?
I love Jack in the Box.
Yeah, or Cracker Jack, though, is like, which one is Spider-Man? Which one is Daredevil? Is Batman in there somewhere? I mean, but the thing is, just like the Watchmen, based on the Watchmen comic characters being based on
Charlton characters.
The Charlton, they're not exact archetypes, but you can recognize them. But
he's trying to say,
yeah. So he takes that you recognizing them, and then he starts playing with that as well. So he's telling a Spider-Man story in some ways, but he's also telling a story that is very cleverly playing on your expectations of a Spider-Man story, and then you're getting something that's not quite a Spider-Man story. I think that double level of that one issue working, if you took it perfectly as a Spider-Man archetype, or if you took it as Spider-Man archetype and got surprised by it not being Spider-Man, is like that. Both of those things can be there at the same time. I think is just incredible. I can't think of anyone else who has made superheroes feel as new and as recognizable simultaneously as Busiek has in all of the stuff that we've talked about. But I think of Astro City as sort of the culmination, the pinnacle of the stuff that he did in Marvels, the stuff that he did in Secret Identity, the stuff that he did in Untold Tales of Spider-Man, and he sort of like fermented it all to this brilliant little cocktail that he then goes on and on with in Astro City. It's superb.
Good. All right, so I have my last thing. I forgive me if I think I because Astro City is the next story is Astro City, because I did volume 1, I separate. I did that right, correct? Did I do my own rules right? I think I did, right? Because I'm picking volume 2, single story from volume 2 for my top, like my last one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay. So
you picked all of volume 1 as one of your picks, and you're picking a single issue from volume 2 as another one of your picks.
An arc from volume 2, and maybe
right. And I'm just picking the entire series and all the specials and the 3D issue and all of that stuff. I'm putting them all into one slot.
The Aerosmith
flip book, the free comic book day issue, sure, throw that in there as well.
Oh, that's awesome. So I have a little story, and that's the thing, when you reveal that you love Astro City, I was like, okay, me and this guy would totally, I know your taste, and I knew we'd be buddies instantly. I'm like, me and this guy would be like this. I love Astro City, and but I actually discovered Astro City, Life in the Big City, after I read this, or kind of got familiar with this more. And this is going to be, I'm going to find the actual, is going to be the Tarnished Angel storyline. And in this one, there's a reason why I love this one so much. Okay. And it's not like, I don't think it's like the more, it's not as much as in line with Life in the Big City as like telling like a more of a human aspect story. There's a lot of it in there, but it's not, it's more of like a traditional like superhero story, I would say, per se. But because Kurt does such a great job of balancing that humanistic and that kind of fun, kind of throwback kind of thing, that I think this story is so much fun. I just get so much out of this, because it shows you his love of the medium, but also love of superheroes. And it's you could say that for all of Astro City, like you said, but this one in particular really feels for me, I just connect to it. And part of it's because I kind of got into Astro City by reading this. I checked this out at the library under my now ex-girlfriend's library card, which I ended up keeping for a long time. And she actually emailed me like, will you please return this book? It was really funny. But I love this. This cover is incredible, which is not one of the main covers. But I remember years ago, I got back into Astro City, and I found at a comic store, which is no longer there, a Comic Dungeon in Seattle. They had, you're going to crack up when I say this, I found like the whole first series, they were selling it for $20. Or no, the first second volume 1 or second volume, the whole thing for $20. I was like, this is like 10 years ago.
So like a second volume is Confession though, right? That's the one with the confessor.
It has like the preacher guy.
Yeah. So hold on, let me just
check. Yeah, you got it.
Right. So this
was Sorry, go ahead.
This is the volume cover, right? But that single issue cover, the one with the one you were showing.
Yeah, this one just came out. I think this is the first one they released. And maybe
that's the trade paperback.
Yeah. And I actually, because we were doing all this, I went and actually bought this because I have a connection to this cover specifically. I love this cover. Yeah, this is just phenomenal. And a confession. And now it's been a while, but I love all of Astro City. But to me, when I went back and reread it, when I came back to the story, I just fell in love with these comics, this story again. And I think it's just, there's something about this old villain basically coming back that, just struggling with, with dealing with life and everything. It's just, I just love that aspect of it. Solving a mystery. I love that whole noir thing about it, but also go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Just the fact of like, just having someone who redemption. I'm a big believer in redemption and people like, forgiveness. And that's something that in my opinion, in the world today is sorely missed. I'm not saying we should forgive every transgressions they've done, but I believe overall that this represents a good representation of like people can reform, people can still do good things. And like, it's not always black and white. There's a lot of gray and people, Steel Jack represents that aspect to me of like, again, that human aspect of the character of like someone who is just trying to make a living, got found up in something and was trying to evolve himself. After he leaves, he sees people suffering. He wants to do something about it. He's doing the right thing, but like he's, but he's looked down on because he's a super villain, but he's, what I'm saying? Like, I love that whole idea of trying to redeem yourself. And he ends up, and he does, but it's not like the ending you're thinking. That's what I love about it. And I love the fact that like the whole tarnished angel, like theme about these superheroes, like Samaritan go visit him, are like, we're watching you, a-hole. Like, we're going to come after you. And he's like, great. I can't like catch a break. And the fact that like he is just trying to make a living, it just represents a person out there, whether it be a real person who's really leaving jail, who's trying to reform, or anyone who wants to like, for me as someone who makes mistakes and like, people might judge me for things I may have done or said or whatever. There's just a beauty to, I think, of this story, what the themes it represents and what it gives you. I love it. And there's so much there's so many great stories in this. This might be my Life in the Big City and this are tied for me for my favorite stories of Astro City.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because Life in the Big City is a collection of short stories, and Tarnished Angel is one long arc. So, and that's another thing that Astro City does really well, is that they have a bunch of short stories, and then they have a long arc, then they have a bunch, at least at the beginning, and then their volumes are kind of like more like standalone graphic novels these days. But yeah, you come out of the short stories, and I think this was volume 4 or volume 5 after Family Album and Confession and things like that, but it's got references. It's got references to all of the things that have come before, but they're very small and thrown in references, like that thing that you showed with the Samaritan. When he comes to tell him that we're watching him, he says 3.2 because he's counting the seconds for every little trip he takes, just like the very first issue showed you.
Oh my god! Oh, yeah! Oh my gosh! Woo! Oh my god, that's amazing. I didn't catch that. Wow.
Yeah, so he's that thing of, like a flight to Manila takes this long and I've got these many seconds to do this, etc. They're continuing that in that one little panel that he shows up in volume 4, and which the Samaritan isn't even really a character. But yeah, I love the fact that because in noir stories, you always have that down on his luck, just out of jail, used to be somebody, but he never really, could have been a contender, but he was only a low life. And the fact that it's not a super villain, but it's more like the super villain's muscle, the guy who stands behind Skeletor and does the punching, it's that guy. And then it also reminded me of, the movie and the book before that, LA Confidential, where one of the characters over there, Bud White, he's got that thing where he's like, I'm too stupid to figure it out. If only I was smart, if only I was, I know there's something wrong over here, but I'm too stupid to figure it out. And it's just like, it's that same noir character, a kind of brute guy who's trying to solve a mystery, and that's not really his forte. He's neither a good guy, nor is he smart, nor is he rich, nor anything. And it's the most unlikely person who's going to, but that's who these people have. And I think there's that darker edge to it, is what I was thinking. I'm thinking about there are books like so obviously there's Rick Veitch's Brat Pack. And then you have, I think there was a story in Alan Moore's Top 10 as well, which came later, which had to do with the sidekicks, and the secret of what was going on and things like that, which is Top very 10. Similar. Yeah, in Top 10, in I think in second volume of Top 10, where they had, so the sidekicks and the sexual abuse of the sidekicks and all of that seedy underbelly stuff, it's there in some of these stories. But it's very similar in Astro City, and it's got that other thing to it. Someone's killing the people nobody cares about, and only someone who also nobody cares about is the only person who'll help us. It's just that such a compelling noir storytelling thing to put into the world of superheroes, and then make it about sidekicks, make it about those henchmen, make it about the the low life people who never became big, and the cops don't care if someone's killing them, and what's the cover up. It's such a fantastic noir story already, but we've seen it before, but transferring it to this
with
realistic, or the real, it's not realistic, of
right.
course, but
Right,
the
right.
real world kind of approach to this kind of thing, that man on the street, I think it's just, it's another example of how wonderfully Busiek and Anderson are able to take this,
So
this
good.
world they've created to tell these
Right.
different kinds of stories.
Yeah, and I think like the antagonist. I love the fact that the motivation is, I'm trying not to spoil too much here. Is basically building themselves up, and again, the whole idea of like that selfishness, of course, but like just making them like, oh, I want to be. My perception is what is driving me, right? It's not.
Mhm.
It's not even like to conquer the world or being rich. It's to be known and loved is the motivation. And
Because you're a hero.
exactly. And the whole idea of the tarnished angels. And he's like, I'm not one of the angels. I love those themes. It's so good. So good. And I love, dude, and how it ends. I like no spoiler. It's
Yeah.
not it's like whatever, but the
Right,
very last
yeah.
page is so beautiful. It's like, I read it the other day. I was finishing up this morning. I could not sleep. I don't sleep very well. I was just like, oh my God. I was like, I forgot the last page. I was like, damn. I'm like,
and it's quite reminiscent of I was thinking also of Marv in Sin City.
yeah.
The same kind of like, and then the whole thing with angels and all that stuff as well. So there's so many noir touchstones in this story that work for me just fantastically.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, that's all of them. That's we've done it.
Yeah,
We've
that's
done
it.
all.
Great list. Good list.
Yes. Well, Anshuman, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like seriously,
Thank you for having me. This was a blast. Absolutely.
Yeah, same. And like I said, not anytime soon. I want to have you back on at some point in the future, if you Lord willing. You're awesome, and please. I mean, people are already following you, or probably watching this, but they aren't. By the off chance they aren't, where can people find you?
I'm at For the Love of Comics on YouTube, and I'm really even one platform is too much for me. So YouTube is where you'll find me. There is an Instagram account, etc., where I'll post from time to time. But yeah, come find me on For the Love of Comics on YouTube.
Yes, and please like, subscribe if you watch this far. I appreciate it. Yeah, anything I'm trying. It's really cool because today was, I think I told you in an email that this is my 2-year anniversary of the channel.
Happy anniversary!
I know, and I couldn't have celebrated any better than with you, sir. And
I am proud to be part of this occasion.
Yes, and I've gotten close to my goal of I was hoping to reach 1,000 subs. Probably won't happen, but that's it. It's all good. Like
don't worry about subs. Subs don't matter. Subs don't matter. Right. The only thing that, well, I mean, even from YouTube terms, subs don't matter. Only views matter. So remember, it's all about the views.
The views, give me the views. But either way, but yeah, my goal was to get 1,000. I'm pretty close to it though.
You'll get there.
Yeah. I've been really excited, and just the universe of comics of YouTube has been. It seems like it's expanding, and you're definitely, to me, I think, a great voice in it, and I'm glad you're there. And I just hope if you need any motivation to keep going, as far as like to keep the channel going, just know like your work is appreciated by many people. Me included.
Thank you so much.
I mean it. So anyway, again, Anshuman, thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you.
Yes, and because Chris isn't here, I'll end it the way he always does. Read,